Uh, Good evening. Just the celebratory? No, introductory sip of the Sprite as we begin. Just about 7 o'clock, but I figure we might as well start a few minutes early, couple minutes early, so that I can properly welcome you to the show for those who are going to catch this at a later time, and for those that are tuning in as we speak. It's good to be back. Good to be back after we did that introductory episode last Monday talking about the G1 Climax, specifically what it is, what it means, how important it is to New Japan Wrestling, and why it should pique your interest if you're also interested in the realm of wrestling. It's always good to expand your horizons a little bit and explore some of what else is available out in the world. Now, since the show is underway, we've got quite a few topics to discuss this week. I guess chronologically, we may as well start with Saturday. I guess the immediate thing that comes to mind would be the big fight that occurred Saturday evening between Mayweather and MacGregor that I think pretty much the entire world tuned into. If you didn't, you were probably one of very few who did not get in on the show. I myself thought I was being smart, and I ordered it the evening before, and due to some issues with Xbox and the UFC.tv app, two things happened. First of which, I got charged for it twice. And second of which, when it came time to watch the show, didn't work due to an issue with UFC.tv, the app. Anybody who tried to watch that through the same means would have ended up with the same issues. So much so, and it was so widespread that Dana White himself had to put out a press release and a statement on Wednesday, I believe it was, Tuesday or Wednesday, apologizing for what occurred and saying that refunds would be issued to anybody who purchased the fight through the UFC app. So I'm still waiting on that money to come in, but I know that the Xbox has taken care of that part of the refund process, but it is still unfortunate to miss out on that. We ended up catching the fight through ulterior means, much like some of you out there did. I'm not proud of it, but I did what I had to do. When you fork that kind of money down, you're not really willing to fork another $100 down to check it out through another means. Obviously, everybody knows what happened. Mayweather ended up winning the fight via technical knockout, referee stoppage in the 10th round. I personally had MacGregor up the first 3 rounds, which is kind of what everybody was expecting to happen. MacGregor had to come out swinging as hard as he could, as fast as he could, anything possible really to send Mayweather kind of running for the ropes or basically second guessing himself. As I put it, I thought it was appropriate leading up to the fight that Conor had said that he was going to knock out Floyd inside of 4 rounds. He was like, no, I'm going to knock him out inside of 4 rounds, mark my words. And I figured, okay, well, if I were you, that's what I would have to do. It's not necessarily a prediction. It's actually what you would have to pull off, because anybody knows that Floyd Mayweather is the most efficient and best defensive boxer. I don't know about ever, but he's definitely top 5 at the very least. He's the best one walking around today. Um, and the only way you're going to stop him or catch him by surprise is by completely overwhelming him from the word go, especially for someone who has such a, let's say, unorthodox method as Conor McGregor. You can call it unorthodox because he hasn't had any professional fights and he doesn't have your typical boxing stance or your boxing type technique, right? So he's going to be doing something different, and he has to use that to his advantage, or should have used that to his advantage. I find that he didn't. He didn't swarm Floyd as strongly as he should have. And therefore, being as proficient a defensive boxer as he is, he used those first 4-5 rounds to download data, so to speak, on MacGregor and then proceed to use that data to his advantage in the following number of rounds. And by the time that, the 8th, ninth, and obviously the 10th round, he literally was just boxing circles around MacGregor, and MacGregor just could not keep up. He got gassed. Everybody saw it. Do I believe that Conor is right in saying that, that he thought that the referee should have let him go down? Only somewhat. I really think that the amount of shots that he was getting peppered with, still, regardless of whether he's still on his feet or not, the referee always has to focus on a fighter's safety. And if you're not focusing on a fighter's safety, well then, that's one of your responsibilities in the ring, so what are you doing? So he made the right decision by stopping the fight where it did. Now, the biggest thing that's kind of come out since that is all this controversy that's been sparked since the fight. There's a lot of stuff going around. I mean, social media for days, it was just crazy. Everything from memes to, example, a meme of Conor McGregor when he was peppering Floyd with shots as Floyd was bent over. It's like when you're playing a new video game but you don't know what it is, so you just mash the buttons. That made me chuckle. In addition to the theories afterwards on how light some of the shots were, or how light some of the shots appeared that Conor was hitting Floyd with, it made people wonder if the fight was fixed. Now, granted, I don't believe that it was. And I certainly hope that it wasn't, for the simple fact of you had nearly, what, a $1 billion worth of pay-per-view buys or something around the globe. Like, it's just absolutely insane amount of numbers for people purchasing the fight and tuning in addition to all the money that comes in through sponsorship and promotional means and so on and so forth. Anyway, naturally, when you have a big fight like that, obviously you certainly don't want to believe that anything could be predetermined. I don't think that it is. I don't think that it was. Although, oddly enough, in the weeks leading up to that, I was making jokes to some people and saying, well, if they were smart, they would, regardless of all this trash talk that's happening between them, they would come to a gentleman's agreement very, very quietly, that no one else knows about, and say, hey, listen, do you want to try to get 2 fights out of this? And maybe we could arrange it in such a way that, people would want to see the rematch, which means double the money, right? And if they're smart, that's certainly what they want to go for. The reason why I was saying that is there's times like that, especially in the UFC, where for every one fight that's really like a knockdown, drag out, entertaining fight, there's always, 3 that end up finishing really, really quickly, like within a matter of seconds, or worse, some fights that just seem to drag on. The recent Tyron Woodley fight certainly comes to mind when you think about that. And it's stuff like that when those fights happen, that either they end too quickly and it's kind of like, oh, wow. I mean, you have the initial shock, but after that, you're like, oh, wow, I spent 50 or 60 bucks on that, and that's how quickly it's going to end. Or you get a fight where it's, as we like to joke, a 5-round hug fest. I always sigh afterwards and I go, and that is why pro wrestling is predetermined, and that's why it's done in such a way. That's why it's worked, so that you can get as entertaining a show as you can to keep the people interested. So anyway, that's certainly a debate for another day, and I would definitely welcome your thoughts about that in the comments too. The benefits and disadvantages to having something be legitimate shoot versus work anyway. But obviously, yeah, with a big a boxing match or a fight with boxing rules, I guess, like that, you want to certainly hope that it's not predetermined, that there wasn't any arrangements. But the point I was trying to get to is this. Those who know in the boxing world, boxing is obviously one of the most corrupt sports in the entire sports industry. And it would not completely surprise me if, the corruption of boxing were to rear its ugly head in a case like this. But anyway, let's just hope that, what we saw was completely legitimate, and hopefully, some of you enjoyed it and were entertained by it. Honestly, after it concluded, I kind of thought to myself, well, in a way, I'm kind of glad that I'm getting refunded for this, because I don't know, hindsight's 2020. Knowing what I know now, would I have laid out the $100 for that? Probably not. Like, it felt like it was going by really, really quickly too. I mean, maybe I might feel differently if I was able to see the undercard, but I didn't see any of that. And I prefer to watch the show in its entirety, in addition to actually seeing the undercard and being able to see the boxer face the boxer with typical, boxing technique. I do find that entertaining whenever there's a good fight on, if I can catch it. Anyway, moving away from that topic of conversation, there's a few big things that happened this weekend. As a matter of fact, the World Cup of Wrestling, World Cup 2017, started by What Culture Pro Wrestling, concluded this past weekend over a series of days. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the World Cup, I highly suggest you check it out. It is actually available for free here on YouTube. I believe, on What Culture Pro Wrestling's account. So if you have some time to spare and you want to check out either some highlights or the full shows themselves, they are available for free on their channel. So I would definitely recommend checking that out as soon as you can. Second, that would bring us to, on the What Culture Pro, the World Cup, excuse me. In a nutshell, before you go check it out, the format was they invited 64 wrestlers from all over the globe to take part in this World Cup tournament. And how it operated was 7 countries, 7 areas had their own qualifying tournaments with 8 wrestlers competing in each of them. So Canada had one, the United States had one, I believe Germany had one, Japan had one, Mexico had one, England had one. There was another one. I'm trying to think. There was also the 8th was I believe it was the rest of the world category. So I apologize as to the 7th. I'm not sure if it was Ireland, Scotland, or if it was just if it was a United Kingdom tournament. Nonetheless, from 64, it went down to 16, and then the round of 16 took place on one of their last 3 days in the United Kingdom. So there was the round of 16, followed by the quarterfinals, and then the semifinals and finals on the last night. The semifinals, the last 4, ended up having 2 United Kingdom representatives, 1 American representative, and 1 representative from Japan. The latter of which ended up being the winner, Kushida, the current Ring of Honor television champion and the IWGP Junior Heavyweight champion. Kushida ended up winning the tournament in the finals over United Kingdom's Will Ospreay, the aerial assassin, who I also recommend you check out some of their work. Ospreay got to the finals by defeating American Ricochet, also formerly known as Prince Puma, for those who followed Lucha Underground. Ricochet is actually currently one half of the IWGP Junior Tag Champions with his partner Ryusuke Taguchi. And Kushida went over in the semis in the opening match over Joseph Connors. So definitely a series of shows that I highly recommend you check out. As a matter of fact, I believe even the qualifying events, all of them are available on YouTube under What Culture Pro Wrestling's account. Definitely check that out if you have the time. Really awesome shows, top to bottom. Heck, even Will Ospreay's round of 16 match over Rey Mysterio is definitely something I recommend watching. That was awesome. Speaking of tournaments, since the tournament season is upon us, I believe just on Monday night, actually, the Mae Young Classic is now available for binging on the WWE Network. So that, again, 32 competitors from all over the globe. I believe the first round matches are available. I don't know if they've uploaded the second round yet. I don't believe so. So I'm sure they're going to do that over time. Give people a chance to watch the first round, and then they'll upload the second round. I know they've already actually taped, yeah, they taped the first, the second, the third, and the quarterfinals, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, sorry, they've actually filmed the semis as well. They're all the way down to the final. So I'm not going to spoil that for you. But I know that all of the matches but the final have already been taken place because of the fact that they're going to have the final on the live special whenever that will be. I don't believe they've announced a date for that yet. So if you're into some good female wrestling action, I highly recommend you check that out, especially if you got the network already. If you got the network, there's no reason to do that. Make sure you check it out once you get a chance. Let me know what you think, too. I'd definitely be interested in hearing how well that's coming along. So, on the weekend as well, since I was talking about the World Cup and we were talking about the Mayweather-MacGregor fight, there was some controversy. Some controversy that came about on Sunday evening. Any of you who actually follow with the news are probably already aware of this, but at the AAA show, TripleMania, which took place on Sunday. That is essentially AAA's equivalent to WrestleMania. It's their biggest show of the year. It was actually made available for free streaming on Twitch. I'm not sure if any of you had the opportunity to check that out. Amongst the great event that it was, the biggest story that's come out of that since is something that took place during one of the matches, where the Reina de Reinas, so basically the Queen of Queens, championship was on the line as Sexy Star was defending against Rosemary Hamada, and I want to say, oh, I've actually misplaced the name, but anyway, I apologize. Nonetheless, I'll keep it brief. Things got very real between Sexy Star and one of the contenders in the match, and it turned into a legitimate fight. So much so that Sexy Star had busted her opponent up underneath her mask. Hamada was trying to fix things by working with her, but Hamada is not necessarily known for working overly light. Therefore, I think perhaps in that confusion, Star thought that Hamada was also trying to fight legitimately with her, so that turned into a whole issue. Last but not least, Rosemary, who also competes for Global Force Wrestling, then got grabbed by Star and then put into a very real armbar that ended up popping her elbow out of joint because she kept cranking on it in order to get the submission to finish up the match. Obviously, that did legitimately injure Rosemary by popping her elbow out of joint. She is injured. Obviously, she's got some. I read earlier that she has some follow-up tests to go through. Luckily, she was able to travel back home amidst all the confusion. And after the match took place, Vampiro, who is the director of talent relations, I guess, the booker of sorts, was very quick to pull Star aside and reprimand her for what she was doing, and told the other female involved to leave the building as quickly as possible, much like he told Star to do so, because they were looking for a fight backstage after that was done. Let me just correct this. Sorry, I just see there's a lot of sunshine due to the window that I have open here. Sorry. Hope that's not too bad. I apologize if you're getting any glare. So things got very real and very serious. And obviously, the one person who is trying to keep things safe was the one who wound up getting hurt. So since then, there have been promoters that had booked Star or that were scheduled to have Star appear on their shows. They've since canceled her appearances. There's been a lot of stuff going around on social media ever since. I think it's really unfortunate. Um, I know, or at least I've heard. Sorry, I've heard from other people in the past that Star is not easy to work with. That she takes liberties with some of her opponents at times, and is just generally not the nicest person on the block. So I truly believe that through a situation like this, with this occurring this past weekend, and all of the fallout that's happened ever since, I think she's definitely damaging her reputation, or at least she may have damaged it enough. I think that may be. I don't know if it's to say that it's going to be the final straw, but I can't see her getting a whole lot of work coming out of this. And if I were in AAA's position, I would definitely want to do what's needed to A, get the title off of her as quickly as possible, and B, consider letting her go. Because they don't need that kind of negative attention right now, especially trying to establish their name and get themselves in more of a more households over the globe, especially by putting in the effort to have the show be a live stream on a free service like Twitch where the whole world can see it. I'm not sure if the show is still available like via recording on Twitch, so I might recommend checking that out. I may go do so myself after the show concludes this evening to see if it is still available up there, and if it is, I'd very much like to give it a second, like a proper watch amidst all the BS. Again, I don't think that's okay. I think it's really unsafe. It's incredibly important when you're inside that ring and working with people to remember that they're essentially giving you their body, and likewise you're doing the same to them. Regardless of how rough or real something may look, it's important that you're not trying to take liberties with one another. When someone trusts you enough, to help you pick them up in order to just slam them down, they're trusting you completely to put them down as safely as possible given the circumstances. Obviously, it's not a friggin' bouncy castle. Wrestling sucks. Everything about wrestling hurts. That's generally how it is. But you try to be as safe with each other as possible so that all you're doing is getting hurt or a little bit banged up. You're not getting injured to where you can't go and work the next day, or you'll have difficulties literally just moving around. So it's really unfortunate when something like that happens and someone tries to take something personally, or try to take advantage of a situation like that in a very, what I find to be, completely inappropriate and unsafe manner. Honestly, if something were to happen with her, with Star, and she were to get blackballed, personally, I just think, hey man, you made your bed, you lie in it. That's it. That's all there is to it. If you're gonna frig around and do something like that, you should deserve all the consequences that are going to come your way. I do hope for Rosemary's sake that she does get better very soon, because it is very important to try to not miss as much time as possible. So I certainly hope she has a very speedy recovery, and I'm sure you can follow her just looking on Twitter to check up with her for any updates. Now, since we were talking about the Mae Young Classic and the controversy with the females, speaking of another unfortunate controversy, the takeover event that took place last weekend, just before SummerSlam, during it, the longest reigning undefeated champion, Asuka, successfully defended her NXT Women's Championship over Ember Moon in what was a fantastic encounter. Highly recommend you check that out if you can. Unfortunately, during that contest, she ended up injuring her collarbone, actually breaking her collarbone. It was determined that she would need about 6 to 8 weeks of recovery. And because of that, although they were taping episodes of NXT a few days later, naturally, uh, it, they would need to take the title off of her due to her injury, especially if it turns out that she's going to be out for longer. They do still need to have an active champion. So, unfortunately, Asuka, as Triple H had called her, the anchor of NXT, the most important talent down there in his eyes, and in the eyes of many, had to surrender the championship. And we don't really know what's going to happen with the championship. Are they going to have a tournament? Is it going to involve something involving perhaps the winner of the Mae Young Classic, maybe? Hint, hint. Time will tell. But the big question is now, has become very clear that with her relinquishing the title, that ends her run in NXT. So the question now is, where does she go? Does she end up on Mondays on Raw, or does she end up on SmackDown on Tuesdays? There's a lot of ways you can go with this. As far as a wrestling perspective, honestly, she's okay on either show. Like, there's great talent on SmackDown. There's great talent on Raw. I think, and again, this is just a theory. I have no idea what they're going to do with this. But if I were to have any, if I were to be at the helm of the ship and steering its course, the one thing that Asuka's still lacking right now, and that's not her fault, it's just fundamental language barrier, right? She is learning English, and while she's okay at it, it's some of the subtle nuances that she could benefit from having a mouthpiece. So I think it would be a fantastic idea to have her compete on Monday Night Raw and to set her up with a potential mouthpiece like a Paul Heyman. Considering the fact that Paul Heyman is the mouthpiece for Brock Lesnar, who seems to be over on the good guy side of things right now, there's certainly no harm in having Asuka be a Paul Heyman girl and then have her team up with him or hire him for his services, so to speak, and be her mouthpiece on Monday Night Raw. I think that would be fantastic, as she is still undefeated, and they could continue using that undefeated streak. She's undefeated streak. She's never even lost a match since she was signed, pure and simple. She has the biggest undefeated streak, even larger than Goldberg, and she's nearly at 200 wins, if I'm not mistaken, by now, without a single loss. So I think that would be a huge angle to push and use that and say that, Brock Lesnar hasn't lost a match in who knows how long. Now we have Asuka, perhaps the greatest female competitor that's ever come out of NXT, and obviously with the best win-loss record probably in wrestling history at this point, at least for her stage of her career. So she'd have the two powerhouses, both on the men's side and the women's side. And I think everybody could benefit from that. There's certainly no harm in that. Now, what course they decide to take, who knows? But I think it would be nifty, especially if it comes to fruition. I'll be a little bit humble, but to think that that was something that worked out. So at least, kindred spirits, great minds think alike, I guess. Who knows? Now, another thing that's got me excited a little bit on the independent side of things, if I may mention it. Last time I was talking about the G1 Climax and some of my favorite wrestlers that have come out of there. One of my favorites in New Japan, just for how awesome his character is, and I don't know how far away it is from how he actually is in person, but Minoru Suzuki, the Lonely Warrior, or as he's also known by the English commentators in New Japan, perhaps the most miserable human being on the planet. Um, he will be making his first appearance in the United States in nearly 25 years on September 22nd. When Ring of Honor has their next live pay-per-view, Death Before Dishonor, out of Las Vegas. And he will be challenging Cody Rhodes for the Ring of Honor World Championship. Obviously, some people might say, well, Suzuki hasn't done anything in ROH, where's his credibility, blah, blah, blah. I highly suggest you just go back and see everything that he's accomplished in his wrestling career, and regardless of the fact that he hasn't had any matches in Ring of Honor or any on American soil in nearly 25 years, I think he's due for that title shot, just out of simple accomplishments right then. Um, I'm really intrigued as to see how this match will play out with Cody Rhodes. I think it can make for some entertaining television, to put it least. And as soon as I read the announcement, I just freaked out. I was like, are you kidding me? Minoru Suzuki in Ring of Honor in Las Vegas in September. That is absolutely nuts. I cannot wait. I'm very much looking forward to that already. Um, Not to bring it down a little bit, but we were talking about some injuries earlier. There were some injuries this week that took place over at the house shows. Samoa Joe ended up being injured over the weekend. Xavier Woods as well was injured during a house show in Arkansas on Monday, and made note of it actually on Tuesday television with the big sign around his neck saying it's sore with his knee. It turns out that it's an MCL sprain, so he could be out a while. Joe, I believe, I forget what it was. I think it was his knee injury as well. I don't remember if it was MCL or ACL or something. But I had read that I believe it was going to be, he could be out 6 to 8 weeks as well, which is really unfortunate because he was on such a hot streak over the past number of months, from challenging Brock for the championship to the showing he had at SummerSlam. You can tell that the people upstairs are very high on Joe right now, and I think he's certainly earned it without a doubt. It is unfortunate that both those guys get injured, and obviously you want to wish them a speedy recovery. Um, on a quick note pertaining to television this week, there was some debates going on about the big promo face-off that took place on Monday between John Cena and Roman Reigns. Of, was it legitimate? Was it just that they worked it out that way? Because there were definitely some heavy stones that were thrown at one another in what they were saying. From what I've been led to believe, I do think that that was planned and it wasn't a full-on pipe bomb like when Punk was given free reign in 2011 to speak his mind and air his grievances on television without being instructed on what to say, which made for perhaps one of the greatest promos in I don't know about in complete history, but it's definitely something that you cannot forget. This I think was a little bit more contrived. I think it was a bit more planned. Maybe not down to the word, but it didn't feel completely genuine. I don't know why. It just didn't feel completely genuine because of the fact that they were throwing out terminology. You know, where Cena was saying, "Well, everybody, they want me to turn heel," and Reigns kind of paused and then Cena said, "It's a promo, kid. You did it." Like, it felt a bit too. I think even Cena made it an allusion to the fourth wall. So it's like, I don't think it was legitimate. I think it was, they planned it out that way. And it worked out. It led people to believe that it might have been legitimate, or at least to think that maybe it was completely legitimate. And you know what? There's no harm in that either. Anytime something makes you question whether it's real or whether it's not, that's usually a good job. Um, on that note, nothing really of significance happened on Raw other than obviously the championship changing hands with Alexa Bliss winning it back over Sasha Banks. I just don't really know how I feel right now with the women's division on Raw. I feel that for the amount of talent they have it feels like a very small bubble. I don't know why. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it seems like it's always the same few competitors week in and week out in just kind of a small mishmash of said bubble. Although I guess the biggest thing to come out of it was after Bliss won, Nia Jax had, was celebrating with her and then turned on her and dropped her down, and that was the big shock. Now, whether that means that's going to be Nia as a good guy or Nia as a bad, I don't really know. I don't think they've been playing a lot of the good guy, the straight up good guy bad guy stuff as of late. I think they've just kind of let it run its course and do what it's got to do. On Tuesday, though, I gotta say, I missed Shelton Benjamin. He did such a good job coming back and teaming with Chad Gable, and it really felt like there was some good chemistry there. I mean, it's the early phases, right? But man, Shelton. It was good to see Shelton back. It felt like he didn't even miss a beat, man. That guy can still go, and I don't know why. I really don't know why he's not working in Japan as much anymore with the rest of Suzuki-gun, because he was a member of that faction. I'm not entirely sure what happened there, and I don't really want to go searching through the internet or shoot interviews or blah 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 to find out why, but it is good to see him back, at least in a WWE ring. Certainly no harm in that, and I really hope this chemistry with he and Gable continues to flourish, and see where it goes from there. Not that I was objected to Gable's singles push up until that point. I mean, I thought the matches he was having with the rest of the singles roster on Tuesday was amazing. It really felt like a positive highlight to see, oh yeah, by the way, he's not just a tag team guy, and if you give him the spotlight, he'll actually show you what he can do. And you'd be incredibly surprised and thoroughly impressed by what he can do. But I think I like that they're doing this little tag team thing with him and Benjamin for now. And if it turns out to be serious and end up being a fantastic team together that really has some awesome chemistry, well, that can only really help the SmackDown tag team roster. Because right now it kind of seems like we're seeing the Usos against the New Day for Chapter 1004 now. And it would be, I'm just waiting for another team to come in and start to spread out that bubble, much like how the females are on Mondays. It feels like it's a small bubble for the amount of talent that they have. It shouldn't be so contrived. Like, it shouldn't be so small. And it feels really, really small. And I'm not crazy about that. They should be using as much talent as they can. Even if it means bringing in the occasional talent up from NXT just to do a job over someone to get somebody over, there's no harm in that. At least you're not saying the same two people face each other. It really annoys me when they have a pay-per-view match between a couple of people, and then not only once but twice in between that match being announced for the pay-per-view and the pay-per-view match itself, they're facing each other, oftentimes just straight up one-on-one. So the same thing as what's essentially going to happen at the pay-per-view, and you're doing that again beforehand. I don't understand the logic. To me, it just seems like a complete lack of logic, as a matter of fact. I just don't understand why they do that, and I feel that for the talent pool that they should have, they should spread themselves out more and use as many people every week as they can. Goodness knows, with Raw being a 3-hour show, they should be able to do that without having so many in-ring promo segments, but that's just me. I guess the last quick thing to point out is there was a rumor going around that the next step for Roman Reigns after this program with John Cena was then to challenge The Miz for the Intercontinental title. The end goal being that Reigns would win the Intercontinental title, which would actually end up making him the 9th Grand Slam champion, or at least put him towards being the 9th Grand Slam champion, since he had already been World Heavyweight Champion, he'd already been United States Champion, he'd already held the tag team title, so he won basically every title up until that point, with the exception of if you want to include the Universal Championship into that now. Oddly enough, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I don't think they ever mentioned that when Ambrose won the tag team title with Seth Rollins at SummerSlam, that technically made him the 8th Grand Slam champion, since he had also already held the Intercontinental, United States, WWE, and World Heavyweight Championships on separate occasions before winning the tag team title on Sunday. Maybe I missed out on that. It just felt to me like they didn't announce that, and I think that him only being the 8th guy to ever do that, it's kind of worth noting, right? Anyway, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover, at least for this week. Hopefully, we'll have some more stuff next Wednesday or Thursday. In the interim, until then, again, if you're looking for some awesome wrestling to watch, definitely check out the What Culture Pro Wrestling World Cup 17. There's a bunch of shows to catch just taking part of that tournament. If you have the network, definitely tune into the Mae Young Classic. You'd be really impressed to see what some of those females can do, and I have seen a good chunk of them in their independent careers up until this point. So I think you're in for a treat, I guess. Until next week, I want to thank you very much for tuning in. I will catch you either next Wednesday or next Thursday. If you have any questions, anything you would like me to discuss, feel free to check it out, either by commenting in the video if you catch us at a later time, or heading to the Facebook page for the Knuckle Sandwich Podcast, and you can submit your question just by posting, and I'll be sure to get to it if I can. Until next week, I am Justin Roberge. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and we will see you next week for another Knuckle Sandwich. Have a good night.